Welcome to a new episode of the Animal Liberation Hour, brought to you by Animal Activism Mentorship. Our goal is to share remarkable stories of resilience, creativity, and dedication among activists in the animal liberation movement. We are honored that you tune in every week to join us in being inspired by the impassioned guests we have on our show. It's important to AAM's mission as a free multinational program that we support and uplift aspiring and seasoned animal rights activists alike. From one-on-one mentorships, free workshops and trainings, to this podcast, we hope to empower humans to take action and turn our vision for a kind world towards all animals into a reality. In today's episode, I sat down with former vivisectionist turned animal rights, human rights, and environmental rights activist, Rama Ganesan. Rama comes from a South Asian background just like me and is a treasure chest of knowledge. She's currently active in spaces that are challenging and fighting systems of casteism that still remains prevalent in India and the Indian diaspora across the world. We talk about less discussed issues in the mainstream Western animal rights movement. A common fact that is portrayed in animal rights spaces is the normalcy of vegetarianism in India, and this is often highly celebrated. But is this practice truly rooted in compassion for animals? Or is it human supremacy served in disguise? Does the Sanskrit word ahimsa that translates into non-violence that is so celebrated in our movement actually mean anything significant? Or has it been co-opted in its usage? This chat may bring up some points for debate, but I invite you all to come into this space with an open, curious mind, because there is so much to unpack in so little time, and the topics we cover definitely warrant a deeper dive. With that, I cannot wait to bring you along on my own history lesson and experience having my mind blown by the intelligent Rama Ganesan. It brings me so much pleasure and honor and such excitement to welcome you to our podcast, Rama Ganesan. Welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here, Shriya. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, I and listeners to our podcast know that I am an avid listener of several other podcasts, and I have had the incredible pleasure of listening to you on many of these platforms. And a lot of what you speak about, which we will dive into in our conversation today, are things that I've often thought about as one of the South Asian Indian community in the animal rights movement, that whether we like it or not, in the mainstream is predominantly white-centric. And I know we're also wanting to diversify that, change that narrative, and make it an inclusive space. And a lot of what you talk about and the work that you've done, the essays that you've written, just get me pumping my fist in the air, because I'm like, yeah, finally, like someone from very similar roots as myself is talking about these things. So I'm so thrilled that you're going to be able to share your wisdom with us.
Very nice of you to say.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very starstruck right now, in case you can't tell. So before we go into your wisdom, I'd like to know where your journey into animal rights and veganism started, because I think these stories are very powerful and inspiring seasoned activists and new activists in finding community in just stories.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I became a vegan. I think this will be my 10th year. I will be celebrating my 10th anniversary on November 1st, which is World Vegan Day 2022. So that's this year. But I actually started to learn about it 11 years ago, 2011, when my son was accepted into college. He was, he had turned 18. He got a place at Duke University, and Duke had all of the incoming freshmen read a book. All of them read the same book. It's called Common Reading. The book was Eating Animals by Jonathon Safran Foer. And before that, I had no idea, nothing. I knew nothing. And then he was reading the book, and then my daughter, who's a couple years younger, she was reading it. And I said, well, my kids are reading it, and it's like everybody's reading this book, and maybe I ought to read it too. So I started to read the book, and it was an eye opener. And I read about it. It was very shocking. Some of the things that Jonathon Safran Foer describes. And of course, it's the way he writes about it. It's he really hatches it out, and he's a great writer. And the content kind of preyed on my mind. It just wouldn't let me go. I'd be shopping, grocery shopping, and I had a dog. She's now 14, so back then she was 3 or 4, something like that. And we used to buy her eggs, and I'd be buying eggs for her. And then I'd remember he told me how these battery chickens in cages and egg-laying hens are treated, and those are the worst treated animals, the egg-laying hens. And so, am I really doing this? Am I really buying these eggs? And I was actually buying them for mostly for my dog at that time. So I thought about it, and after a while, it took almost about a year. I decided to go vegan, and it felt like a very extremist thing to do. I felt very rebellious. I didn't know any other vegans. I did not know any other vegans, because now I know hundreds, if not thousands. But I didn't know anybody. I was the first vegan, and it felt like I was doing something really huge. I was already a vegetarian, even, right?
Yeah.
So even then, it felt like a big deal.
Yeah. And how about your family? Were they on board? Given that your kids inspired you to read this book, which I'm in the first place, I'm pretty amazed that was required reading at a university.
Isn't it really amazing? Yeah. And Jonathon Foer came to make a presentation. And so people got to ask him questions, and I had my son ask a question, and he asked a question, and that's on some YouTube video somewhere. We can still dig it up. So that was great, and I don't know if it had a huge effect on everybody like it did on me. Other people just went on as normal, but on a few people it had a huge effect.
Sure.
So just reading that book, it came to me at a place in my right place and right time, I guess. And it was a great thing for Duke to do. Yeah, because that was controversial, to be talking about that. You were asking about family. Yeah. Nobody else reacted. My daughter and my son also read it. They didn't really react quite the same way. They were shocked. My son was very shocked, but he didn't really react in the same way. But over time, I kept talking to them, and I don't police them, but they know they pretty much are aligned with my way of thinking.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think in my journey, like you, from a vegetarian family, I think my parents just decided to go vegan just to get me to stop talking about it. Be like, okay, stop, we get it. But they very much resonated with the animal rights. And it had to do with the presence of our cat. She got me thinking about the treatment of dairy cows and egg-laying hens. And I went vegan, and then my mom started cooking a lot of vegan versions of Indian dishes. And she's like, why not just do it? And so now they really resonate with that, which is nice, Gatherings aren't very awkward or anything. Everyone, I'd like to think, gets it. So you have had quite a remarkable background before you went vegan, and that you worked, you claim, you call yourself a former vivisector, which a lot of people don't use the term vivisector except if you're in animal rights. But yeah, but you claimed that as like, yes, I was a former vivisector. Like, what was that journey like? Do you think that may have already kind of laid some sort of foundation of connecting with animals outside?
Right. Yeah. I think that, I started to work with animals and trying to understand animals because my PhD was in animal learning, because, I was interested in animals and, how animals, what they think and how they be, their behavior and their cognition and all, it's like, it's a point of interest, a fascination, which doesn't mean you're respecting their rights. It's like you're interested in them and you want to study them, and invasive methods of studying them, you don't really see that as a problem. But yeah, definitely I was interested in animals, very much so. Um, but at the same time, I really didn't respect them as, beings outside of, having their own wishes and wanting not to be treated as experimental subjects and, invasive methods and so on, being starved and deprived of water. And then in the lab that I worked in, I can go through a whole list of things, electric shocks and various surgeries and some really terrible things. So yeah, these were horrendous. So and then that was, the last animal experiment I did was 1992. So I became a vegan 2012. So it's 20 years later. So that's a pretty big gap. So at first I didn't really, that was a long time ago. I didn't really make a connection, but after a while, I had to kind of sit down and consciously say, yes, I'm the same person, who did all these experiments, who's now a vegan. So, and I had to kind of come to terms with it. But it's not, I think about it every day or, really, because it's really upsetting, and it's happened to other people as well who are working with animals and then later become animal rights people. I don't know many, but I know at least one. And maybe a couple others, but at least one. And it tortures them, So and we have I have to be careful. I can think about it a little bit, but not go overboard, because we have to stay sane and function.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And yeah, I know people who I currently do work with several former animal experimenters who are now working to change the system altogether away from using animals and experiments. And it's refreshing to see that. And it's also hopeful. It gives me a lot of hope in that there are really incredible folks out there who are really changing the experimental
Great.
paradigm.
I didn't know about that. And in fact, that's very interesting because usually people become more set in their ways, they want to rationalize and so no, that's good.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And there's so many up and coming institutes. There's I think the first of its kind in Canada, the Center for Alternatives, a Canadian Center for Alternatives to Animal something. I can't quite I'll send you the information about. There's one in Canada. There's some organizations in the US as well. I know PETA is doing a lot of great work in that.
Right. Yeah, no, I briefly contracted with CARE, which is Citizens for Alternative Approaches to Animal Experimentation. I think CAARE, and so they're based in the U.S., but there are many others. Some, and I know some really good, well-established, much larger ones, going on for quite a while. Prof. I forget how to say the name, but it's a Dutch organization, and they do some great work. So yeah, I'll send you the information about that.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I love, because I love science. I love biology. I love geeking out over it. And my initial passion was to work on developing these, I rather than alternatives, I like to call them upgrades to animal models. And that was why I went into the biomedical field. But I also felt that I kept losing sight of the big picture because it was very get this experiment to work so we can get data and then publish it. And then I kept losing sight of the big picture. So I think for me, the right thing to do was to leave that and really work on changing policy and changing how the experimental paradigm currently functions. And by means of doing so, I've met so many people who are really working towards that, which makes me feel a lot less alone than I was before in graduate school. So yeah, for you, when you had your experiences in the animal research space, and then you are now a vegan, outspoken activist. So what was your process like finding your space, or your form of activism that resonated with you the most? What kinds of activism had you tried before, and how did you find your calling in being
Sure.
active?
Um, you know, the type of activism I do has changed a lot. I think that, um, obviously you and I, we're in different stages of life. It looks like you are going to go into animal protection as a career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what it sounds like. And
Yeah.
so, and I'm like, kind of retirement stage, so in quote unquote, but
Quote unquote, yes.
so I started, I became this vegan, and 10 years ago, and it's like, oh my goodness, I've got to tell everybody, we have to tell everybody, the world has to go vegan, and everybody has to be exposed to the truth, and look at these factory farms, and look, we don't need animals for protein and calcium. We do great with plant food. So everyone, and I did all that, frantically, pretty much. I did that. I did all kinds of things. I volunteered at organizations. I tabled. I worked for a organization, a nonprofit organization, where I made over 700 presentations in colleges and high schools and middle schools around here where I live. And I've done podcasts like this, but no, I've done tabling, organized events, cooking demos, dozens and dozens of cooking demos, some very large events, as well as lots of little small events. A lot of work, actually. So I went through all of this. And then I also worked at CARE for a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I've done various things. So I guess that, and then over time, it became morphed into, and all of these things, while they were fine and good, I guess I moved on to something that I thought was what I was like doing uniquely that nobody else was doing, which is the kind of the caste work. See what I mean? Because I think there's lots of people who are doing the other kinds of things that I was doing. A lot of events, a lot of veg fests, a lot of people tabling and all this stuff, but not enough people are doing anti-caste work. And I think, and my efforts are actually, I'm making more of a unique contribution there, especially from my positionality, than I wasn't doing the other things.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I know I have so many things that I want to discuss with you on this. And I think so. I think you are probably one of the very few people, and I've learned of other people who are doing this anti-caste vegan activism through you, because for you, the way you phrase it, and I'm sure we'll dive in, you can explain the caste system in India a little more so we can give an idea of what it is, the work that you're doing, and why it's so important. And you refer to those who are, who have been deemed as quote unquote upper caste as the oppressor caste, and those who have been marginalized as the oppressed caste. And when you said that, I felt like someone just lifted a weight off of me, because I felt so like, how do I talk about, because a lot of people say, look at India, like vegetarianism, they worship their cows, etc., ahimsa, and there are a lot of activists who are not from this background who really connect with the idea of nonviolence, and so they get ahimsa tattooed on themselves, which sometimes I'm in my mind, and this is coming from my background as someone who has spent my high school education in India learning a lot about certain terminologies, the caste system, religion, and all of this, how it can be a complicated topic to talk about, and it just being very easily portrayed as, look, this is the quintessential loving, kind, nonviolent way of life, when I know that that's not necessarily the case. And when you talked about that, I was like, oh, thank goodness someone from a very similar background as I am is speaking about this. And I just felt like, oh, someone's there. It was just very comforting to know that there was someone out there doing this work. And so I'm very much grateful for what you do. And I really want to talk to you about what brought you into doing this anti-caste work and why it's important in the vegan movement.
Mm-hmm. So, as I said, I was already a vegetarian, even though I spent, 10 years in animal labs, engaging in some horrendous things that, even regular non-vegans couldn't stand to look at. So, the vegetarianism it wasn't really about not harming animals, was it? I mean, you can think about, you can say what we did in the lab was useful, again, quote unquote, but I would contest that as well. So, you could say the vegetarianism was about being kind to animals, but I knew it really wasn't.
Exactly. I do agree with that to an extent, because like when people ask like, oh, were you always vegan? And I say, oh, I was raised vegetarian. However, it was not rooted in animal rights.
Right.
I don't believe it was rooted in animal rights, because I see how people within the oppressive caste talk about, their relationship with other animals. Like they're like, oh, I don't want to like touch that dog, or I don't want to, be this close to a pig, there's still, so to me, vegetarianism seemed like a form of human supremacy in my mind. So I was always clarifying, like, yes, I was vegetarian, but it was not from the vegetarianism in my culture, to me, didn't seem rooted in animal rights. No. I was, but not necessarily the culture.
Yeah. It's rooted in purity and pollution.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, but like in India, they say vegetarians aren't close to animals. In fact, it's the opposite. It's like they don't like animals.
Exactly. It's like distancing. It's like you said, purity and pollution. It was viewed as consuming these animals was polluting, and you're causing impurity to your own body, which is, so it wasn't so much, oh, you're murdering another animal. Maybe that was, I don't know if that was a part of it, but to me, it seemed more of like, oh, I don't want that dirty thing in me, as opposed to someone is being tortured for, my sustenance or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. I think, obviously, if you're not eating meat, you could say you're not killing animals, but we're not talking about dairy. Of course, dairy is torturing animals.
Yes.
And indirectly killing animals, I suppose. And that feeling, yes, in fact, we're saving animals. Yeah, that could come by later. But, really, the vegetarianism is about supremacy, but about purity and pollution, and about claiming supremacy over certain other groups of human beings.
Yeah.
So it's about hating other people. The quote is Dr. Pratap Mehta, who's an academic, and this is what he wrote. Behind the solicitude for the cow lay a visceral hate for beef eaters, as if the very gentleness towards the cow was merely a sublimated form of cruelty towards others. Yeah. So, he's just put it very succinctly, but that, this is from me saying it or somebody else saying it. Yeah.
No, I think that was a very powerful statement. And, there's always this idea of they worship their cows. And it's like, I don't know. I would be at certain family functions and occasions where the presence of a cow and her calf was considered sacred and holy and auspicious. And I was excited that there was a cow there, because it was like, oh my gosh, there's, for me, that was the excitement. But I also felt very uncomfortable with the fact that, they were just tied up and wearing all of these embellishments and made to be there. And I was like, maybe given the choice, they probably wouldn't want to be here.
No. And temples, they have cows, tied up,
Yeah, elephants too, and
Yeah. Yeah. So, even now, well, I'm going off topic a little bit, but
no, please, this is
yeah,
all you.
yeah. So no, I'm like, certain foods that have milk in them are considered pure.
Yeah.
Milk is considered pure, but
Yeah.
not meat.
Yeah.
I mean, it is all kind of very hard to understand for people who are not from the culture. Well, it's hard to understand even for us.
Yeah.
Who are from the culture.
Yeah, I know, because it's like we're not allowed to, well, it's not like we're quote unquote not allowed to question it, because that's how it is. That's how and I think that's something that's I guess a lot of us, not just within the Indian cultures, can resonate with. It's like, oh, that's how it's always been, so we're not going to question it. But I think that's a similar case here too, where it's like, if we do question it, it's like, that's how it is. Don't ask questions, just do it.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what culture is, because even here, people are told to love animals, and they eat pigs and lamb and little baby lambs and so on. And it's like, well, why is that? Well, that's just how it is. And so, yeah, that is the sort of thing. That's kind of these things in culture you kind of learn when you at an early age, and then that's just the way it is, and we do not question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And one of the topics that you talk about is the word ahimsa, and how that could maybe unknowingly, not as from a completely educated point, being co-opted within the animal rights movement, because yes, we resonate, like I'd said earlier, with that core message of nonviolence, but perhaps the root of the word ahimsa is not rooted in that ideology that we are trying to propagate. So can you speak to that?
Ahimsa, it has such a big prominence in the animal rights community, or a vegan animal rights community. So when I became a vegan, it's like, it's everywhere, among all the white folks. I mean, it's like, but the reason for that is, it's actually one important thing, and that is Jay Dinsha, who was a person of Indian descent, who lived in the USA. He started the American Vegan Society like decades ago. I don't know, 70s maybe, decades ago. And he had the Vegan Society had a magazine and the magazine was called Ahimsa. Mm. So I would say he was to blame. I mean, people forget about American Vegan Society now. Okay, they're still around, but they're not like the other large organizations that have a large social media presence and Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. So they're quiet in that way, and so they've been kind of forgotten. Yeah. But that's where a major push for the word ahimsa is definitely, it has to be attributed to that magazine. Mm. And without that, I don't think it would have quite such a predominance today.
Right, because I haven't heard it much outside of, when with the Indian fight for freedom, there, I would hear the word ahimsa when I learned about that history, but I don't think I've heard it as much as I do then in the quote unquote mainstream vegan animal rights movement, where everyone's talking about ahimsa, and it's like, what?
No, I know. So yeah, we could blame Jay Dinsha a little bit for that.
Okay.
So yeah, but if you take, but honestly, when you talk about the oppressed people of India, and we say the oppressed people, it's not like the USA, right? Because here we have, people who are the descendants of slavery, right? Mm-hmm. For example, and they're actually numerically a minority, because there's 12% or something like that, between 12 and 15% are Black American. But in India, it's like the oppressed people. I mean, it's like the supremacists are the minority, because the Brahmins are like 3%. 3 to 5%, ridiculously small number. And then there are other oppressor castes, Kshatriya and Vaishya, Banyas, and so on. And it's really much less than 30% of the people. So the oppressed people are in fact the majority. Mm-hmm. And so, and of course, they are oppressed to various different extents. And the most oppressed would be the Adivasis, These are the indigenous people, that's what they're called. And when the sense that they're sort of live outside of society.
So
And
before we kind of dive into that, would you mind giving us a breakdown of
yeah,
the hierarchy so those who aren't familiar have
all
an
right.
idea?
Okay, so the caste system that is associated with Hinduism has four what they call Savarna castes, or actual caste Hindus, and they are the Brahmins at the top, and Kshatriya, kind of little bit below, but not much. So in the Brahmins are the priestly caste. And then they're about, as I say, 3 to 5%, 3% could be more or less in different parts of India, but not much, between 2 and 5%. And then we have Kshatriyas, who are the rulers, the monarchy and the military, and I'm going to guess maybe 10%. I'm not sure, but something like that. And then we have the merchants. And the banyas, and that's another 10% or so. So this would, and then we have another the fourth, and then we have the the lowest one within the caste system, and that would be the Shudras. Just kind of a derogatory term. They don't, these days we don't use that term. We tend to say OBC, other backward castes, but that tends to, it gets complicated. It's a legal term. But anyway, the Shudras they're supposed to be they are service people for the other three castes, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, and the Vaishyas. Okay, so the Shudras were the lowest. But even below that, so these four, they are actually the Savarna castes. They are actually the caste Hindus. But even outside of the caste system, there are people who are not even part of it. They're called Avarna, and they are the former untouchables, now called Dalits. And that's actually made up of all kinds of different castes. Like they would be, and all of like I said, all of these castes are associated with certain occupations. So the Brahmins were priests and teachers, and the Kshatriyas were rulers and so on. The Vaishyas were business people, and the Shudras were service people, like peasants and all kinds of crafts people. And then what would the one below, the untouchables, what were they? Well, they were the ones who did all the absolutely menial jobs, clearing away dead animals, sweeping the streets, and cleaning toilets, and leather work, like skinning animals, every kind of menial. And right now they do manual scavenging, which is cleaning sewers manually. Okay, so that's associated with, and people die. It is a horrendous job. It's something that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, and it is some it's a shameful thing. And even now you go and see who is dying as a manual sewer, and they would be Dalits. They would be dying because they have to climb down into these sewers with these toxic gases, and they have to drink before they go there, because who can stand it? Okay, so they and they die. They have toxic gas exposure. So this is what we have. The four caste Hindus, again, they are rank ordered. And then below that, we have the formerly so-called untouchables, now called Dalits. And so I was going to say, and Dalits are not all uniform, the same kind of people. It's a different bunch. And there are different occupations. Like I said, the sweepers and cleaners and various things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
And then, of course, you also mentioned the Adivasis, who are also outside of the caste system. They're kind of like considered forest dwellers. But yeah, so and they are tribal people.
We're probably the ones more in touch with the natural world, I would assume.
Right. Yeah, and that is a very strong argument to be made there. Yes, and they are fighting, habitat destruction, so on. Yeah.
Yeah. So why is using the term, or the co-opting of the term, ahimsa within the predominantly white vegan space problematic when we factor in the origins of this word and the caste system in India?
Okay. So, because for the majority of the people, when you say we are ahimsa, that is people, because only the upper castes are vegetarian,
Yeah.
primarily Brahmins, but also the other Kshatriyas and Vaishyas too. And then while at the same time they are rendering some people as untouchable, enslaved people, the Shudras are enslaved people, untouchable people. Well, where is your ahimsa? Well, where is that? So wouldn't these people who OBCs are 30%, Dalits, Adivasis are 20%, like 50 plus percent, the majority of the people, well, where's the ahimsa? So they consider it BS. Right?
Yeah.
When upper caste people come along and say, oh, we're all a bit ahimsa and we care about animals, and they call it out. They say, what BS are you talking about? Hang on, I got a great quote for you right here. I'm going to go back in this set of slides. And there is somebody on Twitter called Thayan, Thayyan, or something like that. And he really says it the way it is. So I follow him. And so this is what he's writing. Okay. Somebody else has written this: veganism, because Baba Sahib Constitution has outlawed practicing untouchability on the basis of caste. Okay. So untouchability, I won't touch you because you're impure. That's been outlawed. Doesn't mean people don't do it, but it is against the law. But now we have this thing called veganism. Well, what does veganism mean to these people? It means it's another kind of untouchability. That's what it means. So what Thayan says exactly. The casteist Brahmins of Nahu are proud about the caste, which is nothing but, okay, there are some typos in here, nothing but dehumanizing other lower castes, are suddenly worried about other living beings. Do you see what I'm saying? So they're saying, you're proud about your caste, you dehumanized me, okay, me and hundreds of millions of other people, because Dalits are what, 200, 300 million people in India. Right. You dehumanized me. You said I was untouchable. You said I can only do these menial jobs. You said I could not be educated. You poured molten lead in my ears if I heard certain scriptures. Yeah. Okay, and now you're worried about other living beings like cows. So this is what they think about us, about vegans. Yeah. Okay, you outlawed untouchability, and now you come up with veganism. It isn't just the white vegans, because that Brahmins and other upper caste vegans, they promote this idea that, oh my gosh, we're all ahimsa, we are all spiritual, we came up with yoga. All of this is BS. Yeah. Okay, so all of this is lies. I mean, we want to present a good image to the outside world. We want to, to maintain a good image of ourselves to ourselves. Yeah. When I say we, I mean talking about other so-called oppressor caste or upper caste people. Yeah. And so, we don't want to face the truth about ourselves. So, so I mean, and they'll, and there's a battle. They say, we are the ones who are being persecuted. I don't know about you, but that's how I was raised. I was raised to think we're the ones being persecuted. I'm the one being persecuted.
Yeah. That's, when you read that that post, and that gets me to think about how that would be perceived by not within the caste system, but from outside, like in the Western world, when someone were to say, oh, I'm having these issues and you don't care about that, but you're going off and saying that you care about another animal. Right. And I can see how within a vegan movement that is also seen as an offensive way to look at another animal, because what we are saying is, that caring for a cow or a pig or a rat is not lesser than caring for another human. However, from the purview of someone who's being oppressed, that might not necessarily come across that way. So how do you see that we can bridge that without diluting either of their oppressions?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. All that is very true. I think if you're, and we can talk about other people, we can talk, and I thought you were going to go in a slightly different direction, but we can go back to that if you want. Yeah. But going to, I don't think you can go to an oppressed caste person, especially not me, who's in this positionality of being the oppressor, and tell them, you know what, you and the cow matter equally. No, no, that is not what I'm going to do. No, I no, my position. I mean, that's, first of all, like, okay, how was that even? Okay, so maybe it's a tiny bit better than saying the cow is more important than you.
Yeah,
that happens too. That is absolutely happening. I mean, that happened. When was this? Like 2002. Okay, when there were killings in this place called Jajar, and the newspaper article came out. They said, amount of saying the cow's life of a cow was more valuable than that of humans. Okay, so no, I don't. That's what, and that's what these people have been dealing with for I don't want to say thousands of years. I mean, oppression goes back thousands of years, but it's changed form. So I don't want to take things too far, but they have been oppressed for thousands of years. And then they've been held in position even lower than animals, and now I tell them, oh, I'm holding you equal to a cow. Okay, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying I'm not an animal rights person. I'm not saying I don't think cows are important. I do, but that is not the right place for me to go and talk about whose life is more important.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, thank you for.
I'm listening. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to understand them. I want to hear things from their point of view. That's what I want.
Yeah, and you also talk a lot about those from within the oppressed caste who are disrupting this human supremacist culture by owning their veganism, by embracing an anti-oppression, collective liberation vegan lifestyle. Can you and you're also very cognizant about emphasizing providing them that platform, which I'm so appreciative of. And I'm really hoping to bring one of these brilliant activists on this podcast to talk about that as well. And I think seeing these conversations happening, I learn of these conversations happening in India because I follow you on social media. So can you talk about how they are going about, from your lens and from your observation, how this is a powerful way of truly representing veganism as a social justice issue and not just a fancy vegetarian way of life?
Well, the people from the oppressed castes who are vegans, okay, that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yes.
Okay, there aren't that many of them. Okay, and they have so many issues to deal with within their own community that they're considered traitors. Okay, you've taken on the position of the oppressor now. That's how they're treated. It's going to take a while. But I mean, I also don't think it's right for me to go to somebody who's oppressed caste, who's a vegan, and I know a few. I mean, I don't know dozens and dozens, but I know a few, and say, I celebrate you, I put you on a pedestal. No, I'm not going to do that, because they're people, and it's great that they're vegans. They're obviously going to be anti-caste, and they should be, and then they are. They are, and but and then there's other things that we might disagree on. I mean, they're their own people. I don't look too closely, or like I said to my kids, I don't police them. I don't police them. That's what have my caste people been doing all the thousands of years, oppressing other people and policing them and telling them how to do things. Well, I'm not going to do that. So that's great that they're vegans, but I mean, unless they come to me for something, I'm not going to go put them on a pedestal and go, well, that is so offensive, Shriya. Don't you see that as offensive?
I do think so. I think it's glorifying being a basic, decent human being, and it's also kind of infantilizing.
That goes for anybody, though.
Yeah. I mean, that
goes for anybody. But I'm saying these oppressed people, who the marginalized.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. To start celebrating them, I feel like I'm using them.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I understand Yes, I agree with that as well. That it's it seems like a very, it doesn't come across as genuine to me, as you're very truly feeling like you appreciate what they're doing. It's just like, oh, you tick the vegan box, so therefore there you go.
Yeah, therefore you're on my side, and
like
I'm
you're
going to
very, like,
celebrate you, and I'm going to promote you. You know? No, because I think that if I'm going to be truly anti-caste, then I'm going to promote anti-casteism, regardless of whether they're vegan or not, whether, you know, just whether they eventually does veganism, maybe they won't be, you know. It's nothing to do with that. It's like saying, you know, we also see it in the vegan community, the anti-racist vegan community. You know, like we'll say we'll celebrate Black Americans who are vegan, yay, and that's a totally different situation. And I don't think we can really compare, but it does have some similarities. But you know, otherwise, would you care about Black Lives Matter for its own sake? For its own sake, you know. So would you be doing that? Are you only celebrating Black Americans because because they're vegans or animal rights activists? You know, for me, that's a little offensive. I think that you should be anti-racist regardless.
There's like a hidden agenda there that just doesn't sit well with me.
Hidden agenda. Yeah. And I think that definitely you should have some of these other people, and they should, you know, speak for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And I recall when I reached out to you very early on when I first heard you on a podcast, and that was one thing that you emphasized on very strongly, is that for their perspective, I would really implore you to reach out to these people because it's their stories to represent, and that's, I really respect that, and I'm very much looking forward to having some of these really fierce activists.
I mean, I still think it's in the early nascent stages. So it's gonna be some time before it sort of coalesces and becomes a real movement, which I hope it does. It is, you know, for example, and this is just one story after another. I don't know whether you heard this story, but it's because I'm in the anti-caste discourse so much, I can't help but hear it. JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, they recently, they had this kind of religious holiday. It was a Hindu religious holiday. And I forget who it was, but some people they might have been Muslims, but I don't know who it was actually. They were eating chicken, okay? And so certain right-wing groups, right-wing, you know, meaning RSS, BJP groups, came along and physically assaulted them. Physically assaulted them
and
for eating chicken on a religious holiday.
They're political parties, correct?
Well, BJP is the current ruling party, and RSS is the ideological wing of BJP.
Okay.
And I know this student group, that the right-wing student group is called ABVP. I can't remember what it stands for, but it is a right-wing group. And so this right-wing group went and physically assaulted these people who are eating chicken. Okay, and so of course everybody is on this. Okay, this news got a lot of airplay, but you know, these kinds of things, they happen all the time, and far worse things happen. And so these people are actually you know, getting hurt. And then you know, what would we say as vegans? We would say, oh, you know, what are we going to say? You know, we as animal rights people, as animal liberation people, and total liberation people, we should go and protest those ABVP, that right-wing student group. So how dare you go beat somebody up for eating a chicken? Okay, that seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But is that what you want as an animal rights person? For some right-wing Hindutva ideologist to go and beat up somebody for eating a chicken? Is that impression of you? Is that what you want as an animal rights person? Do you want them representing you? No. Okay, I don't want them representing me. Somebody who goes around saying, "How dare you eat chicken on my holiday? You polluted my holiday," or whatever, you know, and physically assault them, you know, literally kind of, you know, bleeding. No, that's not the face of the animal rights movement that I want.
Right.
And it isn't animal rights.
No.
And you can't divest yourself from it. You can't say that's not animal rights, okay? Because from the outside, it all looks the same. Yeah. You beat me up for eating a chicken. Doesn't matter if you're animal rights or a right-wing ideologue, right? from the outside, it looks the same.
Yeah.
So the only way that animal rights can work in India is if it was totally anti-caste, completely anti-caste in every single way. And what that means is what I've been exploring. What does it mean to be anti-caste?
Yeah, because it sounds complicated, because in my mind, I'm like, how does an animal liberationist, and it's okay for someone to care about animals so deeply, and in this situation be met with, okay, how do I encourage, like, I'm not advocating for beating somebody up for eating another animal, but how can we advocate for them to not eat an animal and still celebrate the holiday, and do that without coming in as I'm a savior and I'm going to tell you without, being the typical quote unquote police in that situation. Like, how does an animal rights activist show up in these spaces?
Right. Well, I mean, think about it. People are eating turkeys on Thanksgiving. You don't go beat them up, because we know why? We're terrified. Because there's too much power.
Yeah.
We beat up the people who have less power than us. BJP is the ruling party. Okay, so if there's a beef ban, what happens? That gives vigilantes, okay, to go and beat up these.
Yeah.
Is it authority?
Well, it's like a fake sense of authority, I guess.
It gives you a certain authority to go beat people up, and they're never prosecuted. Well, I mean, literally, all these cow vigilante lynchings.
Them the audacity
literally
to
killed.
do it. It fuels their audacity.
Yeah, the audacity. Well, okay, so we beat up people who are, have less power than us. That's so in India. It's right now the Hindutva people who have power, and so they are they feel righteous and go beating people up. Is that the kind of animal rights that we want to be associated with? That it is not. It isn't. Because animal rights is about free liberation. Exactly. It's about anti-oppression.
It's about an individual's right to live free of harm, bodily autonomy. All of that is encompassed within the vegan movement and the world that we're fighting for. And how we elevate everybody without diluting the oppression of another is, I think it's something that we need to have these conversations, but not just sit around talking about it. We got to do something about it. And I think to be able to do that starts with these discussions. And I'm glad that you brought up the beef ban, because I feel like the current political party in India's the projection of, look, they're protecting their cows. No one reads the small fine print of conditions apply in these bans, and how it's rooted in anti-Muslim rhetoric, and a very casteist rhetoric also. So why is, and I also saw some excitement within the not as well educated on these issues vegan spaces who were celebrating this. Look, vegan, there's a beef ban. Like, is this like good for the animals? And then I read a little bit into it, and I'm not as well versed about the nitty gritty of the ban.
It's very complicated. And the beef ban kind of varies by state. Okay. But I can tell you, because India has a lot of these different states, but yes. I can tell you that over time, it is just becoming more and more stringent.
Okay.
Since the BJP has in power. Okay. So it's more and more states, and more stringent within each state. So it's just, the beef ban is getting just more extreme.
Mm-hmm. And now I'm curious as to if the idea is about, I don't understand, period. It's like, why ban beef? Is there something about cow's flesh that is rooted in supremacy? Or is it because cows are considered quote unquote holy? What about other animals? And I know we briefly talked about, it's not
Yeah, well,
it's not
white
really
cows,
ahimsa because it's very selective ahimsa.
yeah. So, why cows? Yeah, it almost seems really arbitrary, but it has to go back to, and again, I'm going to blow people's minds because things kind of flip-flopped
Yep.
in history. So way back 3,500 years ago, certain migrants, we call them, came into the Indian subcontinent, and they had an animal sacrifice culture. So thousands of animals were sacrificed, and when you read the Vedas or even the Upanishads, it begins with the sacrifice of a horse.
Yeah, and
It
these
does.
are considered
Ancient
sacred scriptures in
right.
the Hindu religion, correct?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. So, and then after a while, so these animals were killed because they were sacred.
Yeah,
Okay, because what's the point of killing sacrificing an animal that's not sacred? So you sacrifice animals that are sacred, and it's usually it is the domesticated animals that are sacrificeable. And forest dwelling, free roaming animals, you can hunt them, but you don't really sacrifice them. So, and all this is kind of ancient, is in the ancient scriptures, and scholars read them. Even other people like the Hindus and don't read. No, they don't know. They don't even know what's in their own scriptures anymore. It's the scholars who know. So at one point in time, animals were getting sacrificed because they were sacred, and then sacrifices became banned during Ashoka's time, and that part of history I don't know a whole lot about. It's very complex, but I'll just say that right now.
Yeah,
and then when you
was an emperor, for those who don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was around 400 BCE, 400 BCE. So, and when sacrifices became banned, what can you do? If you can only kill animals for sacrifice, and you can't kill sacrifice animals anymore, then you can't eat animals anymore. So that's when Brahmins, because Brahmins became vegetarian because of that. I mean, that is the anti-caste history tells us that. So the anti-caste history tells us, in fact, the reasons that Brahmins became vegetarian. I'm sorry, did I say vegan? I don't know if I said vegan. I'm vegetarian. I said vegetarian.
Yeah.
They became vegetarian in order to reach this supremacy because over Buddhism, because Buddha and James Mahavira, they said, you can, because Brahmins were saying you can reach salvation by sacrificing animals. It was a sacrificial religion. And the Buddha said, no, that it doesn't work that way. I went off and I meditated for so long, and I figured out what is the nature of the world, the cosmos, and I said, no, that is not how it works. And then Ashoka went along and said, I'm going to ban sacrifices. And when that happens, the Brahmins got really mad, and they said, we're going to go vegetarian, and you guys are going to be untouchables. So anybody who eats meat still, you're untouchables, and we're the pure ones. Because remember, Brahmins were the priests from all times. They are the stewards of the religion. What they say goes. Okay, so that's what they decided. So this happened, I don't know, I'm going to say a broad time period, 400 BCE to 400 CE. During that time, the whole switch happened from a sacrificial culture to a vegetarian culture. Yeah. But even now, I still see some vestiges of it. So even today, like if I watch a YouTube video on how to cook a certain something, right? So this middle-aged Brahmin lady would be saying, oh, because you add milk to it, it's pure. So we're not actually adding, it's not meat anymore, but it's still an animal product. It's milk. If you add milk to it, it's pure. Why?
Yeah. How? Tell me.
It's still there. It's still there.
Yeah, it's again, no one questions it, and then we need to talk about it, because otherwise no one's going to question it.
Yeah, so you said, I guess I'm answering your question on why cows, right?
Yeah. I mean, kind of. I think like why it settled on cows, I think still seems unclear.
Maybe this will answer your question. Yeah. So the people who I call the migrants, okay, so the steppe pastoralists, so they were a pastoral culture. So, and they're nomads, and they were nomadic. They took their herds of cows with them, and they milk the cow and they ate the cow. So the cow is very important to their way of life. Without the cow, there is no pastoral nomadism.
Oh, so by I guess criminalizing the consumption that was kind of the core of their sustenance, they were able to assert their power.
I think you got that. I think you got it right. So remember, I was saying that cows were sacred, and so therefore sacrificing cows is a sacred act. Sacred. You're kind of paying homage to the deities and Indra and whoever. Those were the Vedic gods. Okay, so but then if you can't sacrifice animals anymore, then we're the that's the other thing. Brahmin said we're the only ones who can sacrifice. You can't sacrifice. We're the only ones who can do it because we're the priests. Okay, so if somebody else sacrifices, that's just killing. But if we sacrifice, then that's a religious act.
Yeah.
And in fact, you can even you can find it in Manusmriti. It even says when somebody kills an animal in a sacrifice, that is not himsa, that's not harm, that is ahimsa. And it's a great thing to happen, great thing to do, both for the merit of the person who does the sacrificing, the priest, and for the animal who's being sacrificed, because both of them will go on and be born into a more better life in the next life or something. Yeah. So it's a very good, very good meritorious thing to do.
Oh my gosh.
Is it twisted?
Yeah.
Is it twisted?
It's like logic isn't having a good day. Wow. This is really blowing my mind, and I could just sit here forever just picking your brain.
But I will tell you, Shriya, now, today, if you go to a Brahmin, oh my God, if I even go to my relatives and say, Brahmins used to kill animals and it's even in the Vedas, I say, what? It's in the Vedas? Are you kidding me? They don't know. They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. So if you go and ask somebody and say, this is your history, they wouldn't know. The anti-caste folks know, because they come with a understanding of a different type of understanding, and so that's being kind of handed down. That's not part of our history so much, because history gets changed all the time. People believe in some whitewashed history, and it's getting worse with the current condition and current situation in India. They're literally taking things out of history books and putting other things in there. So people won't even know, and people don't know about their own history, that Brahmins were animal sacrificing, pastoral nomads.
Yeah.
That was the culture they came from.
Yeah, no, thanks for really providing this eye-opening lesson, because I think, and again, we are here as collective liberationists and animal rights activists, and we're not by any means advocating for animal sacrifice. But I think the important message that you are bringing here is that one must be mindful of this history of where this whole practice originated from before we go about using certain terminology such as ahimsa, or by advocating for compassion to animals when that wasn't necessarily the core of vegetarianism in a culture that's often being referred to as a culture rooted in kindness and compassion, which there's a majority of the population who would beg to differ on that.
I love this, the quotes that I started, and these are two quotes. One of them is by Bhagat Singh, who was a freedom fighter. Yes. And he said, a really young guy, I think he was assassinated or executed when he was 23, but he said this: we could worship even animals, but would not tolerate fellow humans to sit beside us. Okay, so I love that, because it's so true. We worship animals, but we can't have, we won't have a dog that sit next to us. So to the majority of people from India, from the subcontinent, if you go talk about animals, it immediately means, oh, you hate me. That's what it means. It immediately means that. And this is what Dr. Ambedkar said. Do not keep contact with those who feed ants with sugar, but kill men by prohibiting them to drink water, because Dalits weren't allowed to drink water from the community reservoir. Okay, they weren't allowed to drink water. A human cannot drink water. Okay, so, and then they had to have this march where they rebelliously, this is the Mahad Satyagraha, which happened, I think, 1928, 29, sometime like that. So they went rebelliously to drink water, say this water is our right too. You know, we're humans. Why can't we drink this water?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but at the same time, they'll feed ants, you know, to make the show of feeding ants and being show of being kind to other animals. Okay, this is the other point I want to make. If animal rights people do think that even though we are oppressing other humans, okay, such as the Dalits and other oppressed people from India, are we helping animals? Are we helping animals? No, the answer is no, we are not. No, we are not. India remains one of the top beef exporters of the world.
Mm-hmm. So much for being a cow-loving country.
Okay, there's another big thing. Okay, you can export buffalo, but not cow, because the cow is sacred, but the buffalo is an indigenous animal.
Oh,
okay? The cow is the one that the pastoral nomads brought in.
Right. So that they're okay, but
the so-called Aryans that they brought in. So cows are the sacred ones. Buffaloes you can kill, but even that gets complicated in some states. So I don't want to make a blanket statement about that.
Yeah.
But most of the meat, I mean, I'd say over 90% of the beef that is exported is buffalo. It's called cara beef. Is buffalo beef, and you know who is profiting? Who is profiting from the beef, the cows, the cow buffalo slaughter and the export, the money that's made from it? It's the upper caste people who are profiting. So even though we are supposed to be the cow protectors,
yeah,
we're the ones who are profiting. The upper caste people are the ones who are profiting from all the cow exports. It's not the marginalized people who have a small beef stall in the corner or a chicken stall or whatever. It's not them. It's like the equivalents of the Tysons and, you know, the Ariels and so on that they have in India, whatever the name of them, I forgot, you know.
I don't know.
The ones who, you know, it's not the oppressed people who are owning those huge corporations.
I agree. Wow.
So animals are still being killed. So basically, and all kinds of encroachment, into forested, like habitats where all elephants and other animals are being driven out of all existence. And I know I mentioned elephants because people have a lot of love for elephants, but all of the animals. And those are all being done by the so-called privileged caste people. As you said, it's not the Adivasi indigenous people. They're fighting against it.
Yeah. So we've really covered a lot here, and I know this can be a bit overwhelming for folks who aren't as, aware and educated on these issues, because not very many people are in this anti-caste vegan space, and you've really presented a lot of important things for those who are not of Indian descent, or even those who are of Indian descent, to think about.
Especially, I mean, you said you went to high school in India, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's more of an experience than me, because I left India before I got into high school. So, you probably have a better handle on these things than I do. I mean, obviously I've gone back and stuff, but even second generation kids who grew up here really don't know. They really don't know. And what I would say is, I mean, I want to reiterate that in India, if you are a vegetarian, or if you start talking about animal rights, that kind of triggers a little thing in the person who's listening, that you're a casteist person who doesn't care about other humans. It has that impression. So I think that people who, all of these, American or Europe, I'd say American really, animal rights organizations that want to go and do advocacy in India, they have no idea. They have no understanding of what's going on, the subtext, the caste subtext, the Islamophobia. They really don't know. I think they should stay out. And I mean, because even I don't know, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I couldn't
there
advise.
are people who are there doing this kind of work. So I guess a lot, passing on the mic, passing on that stage, using your platform, your esteemed platform to uplift those who are actually in a position to effectively do this work.
Right. But
Is
okay. But you see, to me, I don't like that. I don't even like that, because it's like, I'm giving you a platform so you can talk about animal rights. Yeah. Well, what if I want somebody, what if they're anti-caste? But they're not animal rights people? Well, you're not going to give them a platform?
I see your point. Okay.
So so that pisses me off, actually.
Yeah, okay, I think it goes back to the
Right.
conversation we had about the hidden agenda. It's like,
That's right.
as long as you talk about veganism or animal rights,
Yeah.
otherwise
Yeah.
you don't get our right.
Okay, you're going to maybe feature some people who are oppressed caste, marginalized, and vegan animal rights. Great. What about all the 1,000 voices of people who are not, thousands, I say, millions, hundreds of millions of people who are not vegan, and they can't be vegan because they have no idea. They there's no B12. They don't get, you can't get B12 tablets or shots in India. It's not that easy.
I know, you can't just say, just supplement with this. Like, you can subscribe to this. It's like no subscription service for B12, ma'am.
Yeah, and it does get, okay, I mean, and I can understand people like you, because I'm not, when I say you, I don't know you all that well, but I mean, I'm saying that I was completely into this animals, and I have to look at what I've learned and read this book, and I watched this documentary, and I know all this stuff, and people have to know about this. But that's very triggering to people who have always been marginalized, and who have been always marginalized by that very same message for thousands of years. And I'm not saying there is no light at the end of the tunnel. I think there is, but one has to completely, I mean, people in my position, I'm only talking for me, I have to immerse myself in this anti-caste discourse, into to really understand what's going on here, to read Dr. Ambedkar. I haven't mentioned Dr. Ambedkar yet. Dr. Ambedkar, Mahatma Phule, Bhagat Singh. I did mention Ambedkar.
You mentioned.
I did. So really understand the thinking, really understand what's going on. What are these reservations? The affirmative action in India, because that is a huge topic of controversy. Understand it. Yeah, and we haven't had a chance to touch on that. So you really have to understand all that, and without that vegan agenda being there all the time. Yes, I'm not saying I don't have it. I mean, I do. I still care about animals, and it's very I do, but I mean, you have to suspend it. So you're listening to people, and you are reading social media threads or whatever, and people are asserting their resistance. They are resisting by eating animals. They're saying "F you" by eating animals. Okay, mm-hmm. What am I gonna do? Am I gonna preach on them? Saying no. Yeah, that's what we have been doing for thousands of years. The more we say you're evil and polluted for eating cows, and we're gonna kill you, we're gonna lynch you because you slaughtered a cow or whatever it is, the more resistance there is going to be. Yeah. So I say, quit with that resistance. Be anti-caste. Be anti-Islamophobic. Because I mean, honestly, Muslims in India, they really need it right now. They really need it right now.
Definitely. Yeah. That's great. Very valuable advice for those who are really wanting to do the right thing and say the right thing, and know the history behind topics that you might not have necessarily grown up with, right? Gearing towards advice that you would have for those in the predominantly white community, animal rights community, of how they can get started on their messaging.
Just do not reference any South Asian religions. Do not, whether it's Hinduism or Jainism or Buddhism, do not. Just stop it. No ahimsa. Just stop it. Now, but also, that's number one. And then later on, just be aware that when you talk to people from India, I mean, just because we're brown doesn't mean we're oppressed. We're not the equivalent of Black Americans. We're not. Some of us are the equivalent of white supremacists. Okay. So that's how we're considered. Oh, I mean, some of us are considered Nazis, honestly. So, so you don't, if you are American, if you don't know anything about it, well, you don't know anything about it. I'm telling you, you don't know anything about it. So, just be aware that you don't know anything about it. Yes, animals are important, but people are fighting all kinds of battles. And if they have always had to fight to have their value recognized, to go and tell them, they're evil for eating meat or whatever, it is not helping. It is not helping at all.
Definitely. Because I think as this conversation progressed, and as I've had several conversations with so many other activists, it only strengthens that ideal, or the ideology that all of these oppressions are interconnected. We're not equating one with the other, but the system of oppression appears to be the same everywhere. And by uplifting, we can't just selectively choose who gets to be uplifted, because that's only perpetuating these systems of oppression.
Yeah. I don't see, personally, I don't see that we can have a world where we afford animals their rights unless human beings get their rights as well. I don't see it. I mean, people could stop eating meat because it's better for the planet or whatever. That could happen.
Yeah.
And I hope it does. Okay. But if you want people to have, respect for animals in their lives, and how is that going to happen if human beings don't have it? Let me try this on you.
Yeah.
How do I get my superiority? Let's just say I want to be superior. I want to feel good about myself. Okay, I'm superior. Well, look at me. I'm pure. I don't eat animals. But look at that person. They are barbarians. They're like, they have no morals. They kill animals. They eat animals. They're impure. And they have no morals. So they are a deficient human being. They are a deficient human being. I am, not the opposite. I am the realized human being.
Yeah.
They're deficient. Yeah. So you can, in fact, love animals and say, oh my gosh, I'm so fantastic. At the same time, think some humans aren't up to par.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love how you reframe these questions, because I was thinking of it from a different framework altogether, and then this again reiterates the selective respect that we give. Like, I love my dog. She's just chilling, my companion animal. She's just right there. But, am I going to show that same respect to someone else who I don't have that connection with, but is probably paying for buying the flesh of a pig at a store? Probably not. I'm not going to show that same. Will I show that kindness and compassion? When I think of it objectively right now, I should, but subjectively, I don't see myself doing that.
Right. But I mean, we were all non-vegan at one time, right? I mean, I was an animal experimenter at one time. So, and this culture, everybody exploits animals. Everybody exploits one way or the other, even vegans do. Okay. And I mean, less so maybe, but I mean, I would really question how much less. We'll have to see. I mean, it would be great if everybody in the world was vegan. That would be, I do agree that would be great. But I mean, and it's, thinking that other people are lesser because they eat animals. I don't want to use words like exploit, but that is our culture. That is what I mean by our culture is humanity. The human culture that we have right now. I'm not saying it had to be this way, but 12,000 years ago, we started to domesticate animals, and this is that's where it got us right now here. Because it did, because human beings were around for 100,000 years, right? And then the proto-humans before that, we did not have domesticated animals for most of our history. We started domesticating animals only like in the last
Very recent history.
very recent history.
Yeah. Oof. Oh my gosh, my brain. Wow. So you just always come up with these incredible quotes and anecdotes and moments in history. So, and to me, it sounds like you seek a lot of inspiration and mentorship from these revolutionary leaders, the trailblazers, and of course, literature. So tell us what books are inspiring you.
What should people? Well, definitely Annihilation of Caste by Dr. Becker. Just get your mind blown a little bit.
Yeah.
Definitely people should read that. So, I mean, other than that, there are lots of things that I'm doing that I find, as I say, this whole history of how Brahmins became vegetarian, that is of a great deal of interest to me. And it's, so, Ambedkar and Phule and so on, 70 years before him, Phule, they have this history, they have this account, I would say, that Brahmins were animal sacrificers. Then Buddhism came along and said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And, Brahmins got miffed and said, you know what, now we're going vegetarians and you're going to be untouchables. Okay. So that's what created untouchability. The very fact of eating beef made people untouchable. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and then that's the history. And then when you come to start looking at it, what really happened, Buddhism has a very complex history in itself. And if you look at something called Lankavatara Sutra, where the Buddha talks about, I will not allow people to kill animals. Buddhism also changed over time, and it also went to different regions of the world, from India to East Asia, because in India there is, Buddhism kind of died out, and it went over to East Asia, to China and Japan and Korea and so on, and Southeast Asia. So so apparently it was Brahmins who criticized Buddhists, and then the Buddhists wrote the Lankavatara Sutra. So, and said, we're not going to eat meat. Okay, so from what I hear and what I understand, I'm not sure, I have to chase it down, but Mahayana Buddhists, these are the East Asian Buddhists. Mm-hmm. The monks there are vegetarian.
Yeah. Okay.
But only the East, but again, I have to really see if this is really true. I have to chase down the resources. I mean, the references. So, it's a complicated story. Who called out who and for what reason, and what roles did James play in all of this? There are these white Americans. Mm-hmm. And maybe not just white, but then America is predominantly white, majority white people, who are, vegans, and they say, oh my God, in India, now I'm a vegan and I'm going to become a Hindu. Okay.
I have heard that quite a bit. Okay. And I'm like, wait, what?
You too. Oh my God, no. And then I became a vegan. And now I became a vegan, and now I'm not a Hindu anymore. I said I'm not a Hindu anymore. Okay, so now that's my.
I follow the same trajectory as you. Yes.
Okay, but then we have these white vegans saying, you know what? Now I'm going Hindu. Okay, so that just makes me mad as well. So that's like, what a clueless thing to do.
I know, it's like, you did it wrong, my friend.
So what can I say? People don't get it. So I'm trying to be as clear as possible. That is no.
A decent human being. We can tell you that much. Just be a good person.
Yes, be a good person. And anything that says be a good person, I'm with that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just, if you want to put a label on it, do whatever you got to do, but just be a good person. Before we let you go, what does a vegan world look like to you? And I want to preface this by saying that the word vegan comes with an all-encompassing social justice lens, and not just, what you buy at the grocery store and what is on the plate. Yeah, it surpasses food.
Yeah. But I mean, like I've said, I think a vegan world is not possible unless human beings get all the rights that they are due. Until all human oppressions have been annihilated, until all of those oppressions are gone, until, caste oppression, definitely, until those are gone, I do not see a vegan world. So what does it mean anyway? What is the point of having a vegan world if you have casteism? So I like I said, people can stop eating meat because it's better for the planet, maybe, and that's a good thing. Definitely do it for that reason. It's definitely good for the planet. It's in itself a good thing, and fewer animals being killed, that's a good thing. But as to whether we can afford animals their rights, give them their respect, unless we give all the humans the same kind of respect that we give our, some humans, like unless we all have the same regard for each other, and saying, you're not like not holding somebody as to be a deficient human being, born inherently inferior, because that's what casteism is. You're born inherently inferior. You'll never get out of it. So no, we won't have that. Unless we can get rid of that, we will not have a vegan world, because it's meaningless. It means nothing to have a vegan world if we still have caste.
And just a real quick follow-up to that, do you think that it's not possible to advocate for just collective rights for both human and beyond humans at once? Or do you think that's just wishful thinking and we need to be more practical with how we go about this when we talk about human rights and animal rights? And this is just an opinion at the moment. Of course, like we change, we evolve. So we're not holding you to your statement now.
I'm talking very much in my own context, right? Of my own positionality, from my own context. So if somebody is a different kind of person, born into a different position, their answer is different. But from my position, I think that unless I work on anti-casteism, there is no point in working on animal liberation. I mean, obviously I still work on animal liberation, but obviously it depends on the context too. I spend most of my most of my time talking to people who are of Indian descent and so on. It just happens. But I could decide I'm going to do a cooking demo in my library, and there'd be no people of Indian descent there, right? So that's different. Yeah, I would go ahead and just be a regular American. Regular American. I would just say, because I lived here 35 years. So yeah, I could do that. So that's fine. So I guess I'm kind of enmeshed in this context of casteism and animal liberation. So I think that, you're really not going to have animal liberation unless casteism is gone.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And if folks want to follow you, and if they want to get in touch, or is there any avenue that you're willing to offer?
Yeah, I would be delighted to talk to people. Rama Vegan, I am on Instagram. I think we follow each other, right? Yeah. So it's RAMABGAN. And I have some articles on Medium, as you've said. So those two,
we'll be sure to link everything. You can also follow Rama to follow the adventures of our precious cats. They're really fun to... They're just, living royalty. I love seeing their photos, as cats are.
Do you have cats?
Well, she's a family cat. She lives with my parents in Dallas. She just, I call the rest of us her support staff. She lives in royalty, and then we just, go about help, we just serve her as and when she needs. Rama, this was such a pleasure, and thank you for really taking the time out of your day to really educate us on this issue, because it's not often talked about. And I'm so thankful that I came across you on several podcasts and that you've been using your platform and your knowledge to speak about this, and also being very diligent about, encouraging us to reach out to those of oppressed castes who are also doing this important work. And I will definitely be sure to reach out to them, and hopefully, we can schedule having them on the podcast and learning about them reclaiming social justice and veganism through their stories. And I'm very excited for those prospects. So thank you again.
I appreciate it, Shriya. Nice to talk to you.
feel this discussion has introduced another important piece in our puzzle to achieve a world rooted in justice and kindness towards all. It's an opportunity to reevaluate our approach and strengthen our community to attain our goal of animal liberation. I understand that these complexities of social injustices across the globe can make one feel overwhelmed and perhaps less likely to take action for the animals, often because we may fear the consequences of saying or doing the wrong thing. But with no action comes zero change. And on the other hand, with mistakes, as uncomfortable as they may be, there is a valuable space to learn and evolve. This is where community support serves an immense purpose, be it in animal rights or any other social justice fight. As always, we will link information to Rama's literary work, book recommendations, and other resources we discussed down in the show notes. Before we sign off, please take a quick minute to rate and review the podcast. It helps others find it more easily, and the more people who find it, the more they can be inspired by the guests we interview and turn that into actionable change for the animals. Plus, if you have any guest suggestions for whom you'd like to see featured on our podcast, feel free to reach out to us on social media. We love hearing from you. Don't forget to check out our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Animal Activism Mentorship, where you can keep up with the podcast as well as all things AAM. Accessibility to our content without any hindrance is key to our work here at AAM. That's why it's important to us that we offer our resources for free. So if you like what we do at the Animal Liberation Hour and at AAM, and would like to support us, of course, given that you have the financial ability to do so, please feel free to contribute to our Patreon. It helps keep us going. AAM is proud and honored to be fueled by Farm Animal Rights Movement. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help you with your activism at animalactivismmentorship.com. So if you are still waiting for that sign that you should be an activist for the animals, this is it. Now remember that it will take all of us to achieve animal liberation. And as my good friend and co-host Trey says, it is not a sprint, it is a marathon. So we've got to stay focused, stay positive, take care of ourselves, and be the change of compassion that we envision for this world. Until next time.